We want to take a look now at our debt situation and what the U.S. can do to tackle the problem even more. Joining us right now to talk about that is Christina Romer, former chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. She's also a Bloomberg contributing editor. And from Washington, we have Mark Olson. He is former Federal Reserve governor appointed by George W. Bush. He's now co-chairman of Trilliant Risk Advisors. So, Mark and Christina, good to have you here on Street Smart. Christina, let me kick it off with you. We've been talking a lot with traders in Washington, on Wall Street. They're very, very nervous at this point. They say we need a plan. Barring that, is there something the Fed could do potentially tomorrow that you think could slow some of the declines that we're seeing and create some more certainty in the marketplace?
Well, I think the Fed is in a tough position tomorrow. What we've seen coming out of Europe, when the European Central Bank makes a dramatic announcement, that tends to make people even more nervous. So I think the Fed will be doing a balancing act tomorrow of wanting to acknowledge surely a change in the risks, that inflation is less of a worry and the real economy is a bigger worry. And I think they'll want to say something reassuring, but I would guess it would be unnerving if they were to come out with something big and bold tomorrow. I think what they probably will and should be doing is kind of softening up the ground for either some additional quantitative easing, some change in their overall policy framework, or, you know, some communication about what they expect to happen to their balance sheet.
Mark, you agree if the Fed came out with something big and bold, that would maybe scare everyone even more so?
Well, I think Christina is exactly right. I think big and bold is not the answer today. And so if you're not going to do big and bold, I think what you're going to do is adjust the language. And the conversation that we had just before we came on is the sort of discussion that I would expect is going on, will be going on tomorrow and will be produced in the statement. I would not be at all surprised to see language that extends the time before we do any of the before we end the kind of stimulus that has already been put in the package. But for further stimulus, it seems very unlikely because an incremental amount of stimulus will do almost nothing, and the markets already understand that. So in order to add additional stimulus, it has to be in the range of $1 trillion, and that just seems extraordinarily unlikely, and I doubt very much that the votes would be there and the FOMC to achieve it.
Hey, Dr. Romer, you're something of a stimulus expert given your time with the Obama administration. A lot of traders down here and investors around the world are calling for spending cuts, but also for tax cuts for stimulative purposes, although a lot of normal people would think a tax cut is kind of a spending increase. So what's your view as to what should come out of Washington?
I think what the traders are telling you is exactly right. We've got these two big problems, a short-run growth problem and a long-run deficit problem, and it takes a two-pronged approach. It's counterintuitive, but I think we do actually need more stimulus now, probably a substantial tax cut for firms that actually hire workers, but to pair that with an even more, forward-looking but more drastic deficit reduction plan phased in gradually. That you actually need something bold now, but it's going to be bold, extra help to the economy now, and bold, more deficit reduction as we recover.
Will it be difficult, though, Christy? I mean, given what the S&P downgrade and given concern about deficits, to get more stimulative tax cuts here?
I'm sure it will be. I think the president, I think he was exactly right today to basically have a calm, reassuring speech. But I actually think in the next several weeks, I think coming forward with, a bold plan that says, listen, we've got these two big problems and we're not going to do little things to try to deal with them. We're going to do big things to try to deal with them. I think that's a winning political argument, and I think it's the right economics, and I sure would be out there fighting for that. Of course, it's going to be hard to get it through, but he should fight for it.
Hey, Mark, let me talk about the downgrade a little bit with you. I mean, from the S&P downgrade, we heard a lot about politics. They were frustrated by what happened in Washington. And then, of course, there's the actual fiscal problems, the math, if you look at it. What's the bigger problem in your view? Is it politics in Washington, or is it just look at the plain math of our fiscal situation and it's pretty ugly?
To say it in somewhat of another way, I would say it is an issue of stewardship at the moment as opposed to substance. We do not have a debt crisis in this country in the sense that we do have the capacity in this country to manage the debt that we have taken on. But what we do not have is a willingness, particularly in the Congress, I think, to deal with the immediate questions at hand, and further, I think to attach a longer-term budget discussion or deficit discussion to the raising of the debt ceiling, which should have been just sort of an automatic intra-government arrangement. I think cast real questions on our leadership, and I think that there are no innocent parties, or there are no parties, I think, that are winning on this one. There is a deficit. There is a leadership deficit in Washington right now that affects all parties.
Hey, Christina, do you agree? I mean, that we can manage our debt crisis? Do you agree with Mark here?
I mean, absolutely. If you look at what the market's saying today, right? U.S. long-term interest rates are at historic lows. The market is certainly quite confident that the United States government is going to pay off its debt. So we're not in an immediate crisis. We absolutely have a very challenging long-run deficit situation. But what's striking is we are at least starting to face up to that. You know, for the first time in a decade, we're actually really talking about the long-run deficit and really taking some steps. Not enough, but we certainly are facing up to it gradually. And I think that, you know, I think we absolutely can manage through this. I actually think the short-run growth deficit has got to be front and center. I don't see how you ever get the long-run deficit under control if we don't get unemployment down from 9% to a much more reasonable level.
Well, I will tell you that traders on Wall Street, investors say we got to get it under control, because it's definitely creating incredible nervousness in the markets. Folks, we have to run. Christina Romer, thank you so much. Mark Olson, our thanks to you as well.